When we look at elections, it's so easy to get caught up in the personalities, right? Who's the stronger candidate? Who's more charismatic? But what if that's not the whole story? What if an election is actually a system built on data, on trust, on organization? Today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to conduct a political autopsy. We're looking at just one constituency in Nagaland to understand how a political force can just vanish, and more importantly, figure out if there's a path back.
So, our story takes us to Meluri. Now, this isn't just a pin on a map. This is a scheduled tribe reserve seat, the homeland, really, for the Pochuri Naga community. It's a place where identity, it's everything. And the political engagement, it's off the charts. People here are deeply invested. And that's a really crucial point we need to remember as we go on.
And this is where we find our central question, our mystery. We're not talking about a slow, gentle decline here. This was like falling off a cliff. A political party went from completely dominating the area to being practically invisible, all in just 10 years. So the big question is, how on earth does that happen? Let's get into it.
All right, to really get to the bottom of this story, we have to start with the hard numbers. We're going to do a proper forensic analysis of the Naga People's Front, the NPF in Meluri. And believe me, the data, it tells quite a story.
So, let's set the scene. Go back to 2013. The NPF pulls in 64.57% of the vote. Just think about that. That's not just winning an election, that's owning the political landscape. They were an absolute powerhouse, a true stronghold. Okay, now fast forward 5 years to 2018. The vote share, it drops, down to 47.77%. Now look, a win is a win, right? But the cracks are definitely starting to show. And here's the real kicker. The victory margin was just 74 votes. 74! The alarm bells weren't just ringing, they were screaming.
And then comes 2023. The number you see is 1.57%. 1.57. That's it. This is total, absolute collapse. To go from a fortress to barely a footnote on the results sheet, it's a complete political wipeout.
But here is the single most important number on this whole table. Look at the turnout. Consistently over 92%, even hitting 95%. What does this tell us? This was not voter apathy. People didn't just stay home, disillusioned. No, the people of Meluri showed up in massive numbers, and they very deliberately voted for someone else.
And this chart, this shows you just how close that 2018 election was. I mean, look at it. The two bars are almost identical. The NPF was hanging on by a single thread. The decay in support was already deep, and this was really the moment that set the stage for what was to come.
And then this, a complete 180-degree flip. This is 2023. That little sliver, that's what's left of the NPF. The entire vote, pretty much, has swung over to the NDP. The picture really says more than 1,000 words, doesn't it?
Okay, so we've seen what happened. The numbers are clear. But now for the much harder question. Why did it happen? And look, it's really important we don't fall into the trap of blaming one person. This wasn't about one candidate's failure. This was a total system failure, a complete breakdown of the party's core machinery. You can really break down this collapse into 4 main areas. First, there was the Itachu factor. The party's longtime powerful MLA left and ran on another ticket. That split the vote, for sure. But his exit was just a symptom. The real disease was a deep organizational rot. 21 NPF MLAs had already defected across the state. That guts your party machinery. So what are you left with? A leadership vacuum, nobody at the helm, and, maybe most importantly, a narrative void. There was just no story, no reason, no compelling message for why people should vote for the NPF anymore.
And this really touches on a fundamental principle of our democracy. Informed public speech is a cornerstone. A political party has a duty to communicate with the electorate, to offer a vision. When a party's narrative just disappears, when it goes silent, voters are left with no choice but to listen to others. It's a failure to uphold the dignity of the voter.
So the question becomes, how do you measure something like this? How do you diagnose this kind of systemic breakdown in a structured way? For that, we can turn to a strategic framework. It's called the Chaturmukha Doctrine, and it's designed to assess a party's strength across 4 critical pillars of power.
So what is this doctrine? Well, think of it as a health checkup for a political party.
It gives us a really clear lens to look at 4 key domains: the electoral domain, which is how you perform in elections; the organizational domain, your boots on the ground; the narrative domain, your story; and the resource domain, what you have to work with.
So when we run the NPF in Meluri through this framework, the results are, well, they're brutal. The report card is in. Electoral strength? Low. Organizational strength? Low. Narrative strength? Also low. The only pillar that wasn't at rock bottom was resources, rated medium. But with everything else failing, it just wasn't enough. A catastrophic failure across 3 of the 4 core pillars.
Okay, so an autopsy tells you how something died, but our goal here isn't just to understand the death, it's to find a path to resurrection. So now we're going to pivot. We're moving from diagnosis to a prescription. The big question, is it even possible to come back from a 1.57% vote share? Let's look at a potential blueprint.
It has to start from the ground up. Phase 1 begins about 90 days out from an election, and it's all about the foundation. You can't build a house on thin air, right? So first things first, reestablish your teams on the ground, your booth-level workers. Then, craft a simple, powerful story, a Meluri revival narrative that talks about things people care about: roads, jobs, and local poachery pride. And then, you have to start talking. Meet with the elders, the church leaders, the youth groups. Rebuilding trust begins with listening.
All right, 60 days to go. The foundation is being laid. Now, you shift into phase 2, engagement. This is where you take that new narrative directly to the people. We're talking intensive door-to-door canvassing, meeting families in small groups. You release a clear, simple 5-promise plan. No jargon, just a clear manifesto. And you organize gatherings to engage directly with farmers, with women's groups, with the youth.
And now we're in the final 30 days. This is phase 3, mobilization. It's the final sprint. This is an all-out blitz. Daily communications, press releases, fact-checking what the other side is saying. You hold your major rallies, you leverage cultural events, prayer meetings, and most importantly, you execute your get-out-the-vote plan with military precision to make sure every single person who supports you actually makes it to the polling booth.
So, that's the timeline. But underneath it all, there are 4 non-negotiable strategic rules. First, you have to solve the leadership problem, reconcile the factions, or find a new, strong leader to unite that core pointery vote. Second, you have to be obsessed with grievances. Promise specific fixes for roads, for credit, for schools. Third, organization has to be rigid. Rebuild the party cell by cell from the village up. No shortcuts. And finally, engage the gatekeepers. You must win the endorsements of the church and the tribal councils. Their trust is paramount.
Now, of course, a lot of this campaign work today happens online. And this brings us to another really critical point. When you're campaigning, respecting a voter's privacy and their consent isn't just some legal box to tick under frameworks like DPDP. It is absolutely fundamental to building trust. You can't rebuild a relationship with a voter if you don't start from a place of basic respect for their data and their privacy.
So that brings us back to our big question. Can it actually be done? Can a data-driven blueprint like this, one that is so rooted in local identity and so focused on real everyday grievances, can it truly reverse a collapse of this magnitude? You know, the data suggests a path forward is there, but it's not easy. It's a journey that demands incredible discipline and, above all, a genuine, unshakable commitment to serving the people.
If you want to become a people-centric leader and uplift your constituency, get in touch with blueprintstrategies.ai at mgr@blueprintstrategies.ai or call 080-4204-1602. Purpose beyond politics.